What's up, guys? KS here. Thanks for joining me today as always. I've got in front of us today a Glock 19 Gen 5 MOS. Man, I love this gun. This has been a fantastic gun. Now, one thing that people do with Glocks quite often, because Glocks leave a fair amount to be desired. I mean, they are generally speaking very reliable guns. It's something that you can pick up out of a box and run with without too much of an issue. But they leave a lot to be desired in terms of ergonomics and trigger and sights and things that people commonly change. Now, people go a lot further than that, doing custom milling and RMR cuts if you don't have an MOS or something like that. And they tend to turn into what people often call Gucci Glocks. Now, I'm not such a fan of that term, but I get the idea behind it. But to me, that's part of the fun. And again, dialing it in to your needs. Now, yes, it does add expense, but sometimes people don't really mind that so much, just so they can make it their own. Now, this does have a couple of enhancements. It's got the Apex trigger. It does have upgraded sights on it. I never did really swap them out for suppressor sights, even though I do run the dot on it from time to time. This seems to do just fine for me. I do have the agency barrel in it. Nothing too fancy in it right now. But again, Glock oftentimes leaves things to be desired. Enter the Polymer 80. Now, we've spent a little bit of time talking about Polymer 80s on the channel. You guys know I'm a big fan. I've built quite a few of them up to now and still doing some other work on these as well. I'm working with a Norso slide. I've got the shield arms base plate in here, Apex trigger again, and some other fun parts as well. Agency barrel, and this one just happens to be the same as the other one. And they have been a lot of fun, and this really covers, generally speaking, your Gen 3 type of frame. And they've made so many great enhancements to make it a more shootable firearm, in my opinion, than the standard Glock. Now, everybody's mileage may vary there, of course, but I think these have been a lot of fun. The only problem with Polymer 80 is it still leaves a gap, and that's with Gen 4. Enter the Nomad Defense Generation 4 frame. Guys, this is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm so excited to dive into it. Let's jump in. All right, let's do a walk around of the Nomad Defense frame. We'll make sure that it is unloaded as usual. Now, a couple of things, people always want to know what else is going on with the gun. So I do have the Loki Tactical Gen 4 slide on here. I've got a video on that, and I've also got a video on this barrel along with a compensator. These are both from Legion Precision, so definitely recommend checking both of those companies out. And then I do have an Overwatch Precision tack trigger in here as well. This has turned out to be a really nice combo, but in terms of the Nomad Defense frame, guys, there is a lot going on. I really feel like they've kind of thrown the kitchen sink at it a little bit, and I know I use that term from time to time, but it's all about how many features and the execution of those features. So I want to take a look first at the grip texture. And you know, people spend so much time and effort and money getting custom stippling or doing the stippling themselves, which is all fine and good, although you run the risk of damaging your polymer. This is all built into the mold itself, and it's a great compromise between aggressive and not so aggressive that it's going to beat you or your skin or your clothes up. I think their design is really thoughtful, and they've carried this forward to the backstrap, which I'll come back to here in just a moment. I love that. Now, one thing that's very unique, you'll notice these horizontal lines in front. And I'll admit, when I first opened the box and kind of played around with this a little bit, I was a little skeptical on how that would do, because these are not very accentuated. They're there, and you can feel them, but they're not terribly aggressive. However, when I started shooting, this gun did not go anywhere. Man, this thing was so firmly planted in hand. It was almost like an extension of my hand, which was fantastic. So again, in terms of the grip texture, I think they've done a great job. Now, I mentioned the back straps, and so I want to pay a little bit of attention to this. This does have changeable back straps. It's one thing that the Polymer 80s don't do. You're basically stuck with what they give you. But the Nomad Defense frame actually comes with a couple of other back straps. So if you want something a little bit more flat or a little bit more full, you can do that. And it's got the same texture that the rest of the grip has. So, man, kudos to Nomad Defense for doing that. I mean, it just adds to that custom and interchangeability just to match your hand type. So very thoughtful on that. And as we move up, a couple of things going on. We do have a nice accentuated beaver tail here. You guys know I complain about beaver tails a fair amount. The contouring on this is fantastic. It's curved up a little bit. It's extremely comfortable, even for somebody like me that tends to kind of whine a little bit about beaver tails. This is not an issue at all. I mean, it really is incredibly comfortable. It kind of melts right into your hand. And then we've got the undercut under the trigger guard as well, so it just lets your hand get as far up on the gun as you want it to. And then for the magazine release, which is a standard Gen 4, Gen 5, they've got a little bit of a cutout here as well. Again, all built into the mold, so it's really precision done, and it looks fantastic. It's very usable, and you don't have to do an extended magazine release, which I'm not really a fan of. So it takes that out of the equation, but still serves that purpose. And then I do want to come back down for a moment or two, and you never can see this on camera very well, but there's a really nice flared magwell in here, so it makes that magazine insertion just a little easier without it being a real flared magwell. So on the exterior, you can hardly tell, but interior, it makes those magazines just silky smooth to put up. So a very thoughtful design from Nomad. Now, in terms of the trigger guard, another thing you'll notice, the trigger guard is big. You can definitely wear gloves and work the trigger without an issue. It's a big complaint of Glocks. Their trigger guards are actually pretty tiny. So this is a little bit bigger. Now, that means you're going to have to do different types of holsters potentially for this. That's true. But again, it's kind of a give and take there. And if you wear gloves a lot, this will definitely come in handy. Now, another thing they did on the magazine release, they've got a little bit of a shelf here just to make sure that that's locked into place, and that's kind of a nice touch. I've never seen a frame do something like that, so I think, or at least a Glock frame, I think that's actually really cool. Now you'll also notice we do have a little bit more of the grip texture right here, and actually it's sloped out a little bit. I'm not going to be able to capture it on camera very well, but it's sloped down and out a little bit, so it becomes really not just a reference point, but an actual shelf. It's almost like a gas pedal for the TSO, something like that. And it has been very comfortable. It's on both sides, of course, so very well thought out on that. Now, we do have our regular takedown levers. I mean, this functions just like your regular Glock frame. So if you're used to those, this is not going to be an issue at all. And then lastly, we've got our standard 1913 Picatinny rails, so you can hang all your toys, your tiny ninjas, chainsaws, all that kind of thing. They will all go on there without an issue. Now, in terms of putting all of this together, you'll notice this is a 2-pin design, which is unique for Gen 4s. Gen 4s generally have a 3-pin design, but all of your regular Glock parts will drop right in. There is no issue whatsoever getting those in. We're going to take this apart here in just a second and I'll show you. But in terms of putting the whole thing together, not an issue at all. Now, the one other thing to consider with this is actually a serialized part. There's the serial number. You can't really do much with that, but I'm happy to show it to you. So this is actually something that's going to be registered. Now, some people might not like that idea, but there are a lot of people that stay away from Polymer 80s simply because they are not registered. You actually have to go through a process of putting a serial number on a P80 frame and then getting it registered if that's something that's a concern. Nomad took that out of the equation. And I actually kind of like that. I like that idea, especially if you're going to carry something like this. Most people want to carry a serialized frame, so it's traceable, that sort of thing. Again, your mileage may vary there, but I think that's actually kind of cool. All right, let's take this thing apart so you can see the guts. Of course, you do have to pull the trigger, as I just demonstrated, but then everything pops right out. And as you'll notice, it looks just like a normal Glock frame on the inside. I mean, everything is just as you would expect. It's all the normal parts, so if you've got Glock parts, whether OEM or aftermarket, they all just pop right in, as long as it's Gen 4, Gen 3, that sort of thing, not Gen 5 parts, because again, this is a Gen 4 frame. But it all goes together very well, and it's a great opportunity to start working on Glocks if you haven't done so already. I mean, they make that really easy. But then your assembly is as you would expect. Nothing terribly exciting there. But again, I think Nomad Defense has done a fantastic job. And if you're really into Glock Gen 4s, but you want that custom feel, that custom look, and you don't want to ship your gun all over the place and spend many hundreds of dollars to get it done, Nomad is a great solution. So what do I think of the Nomad Defense Gen 4 frame overall? Overall, I absolutely love it. There was a gap with the Polymer 80s going to Gen 5. With the Gen 4, there wasn't anything going on there in terms of fully ready to go customization, and they've done it, and they've done it very well. It's got the ergos, it's got great grip texture, it's ready to go out of the box. All your parts drop in without too much of an issue. It's got the back straps on it. Now, it's serialized. Again, that might be a consideration for some people, but I think most people will be just fine with that. Doesn't bother me one way or the other. Now, you're probably wondering about price, and it's going to run around $250. You might be able to find a deal on that just depending on when you strike. Go jump out on their website, and I'm flashing it down below just to see where it's available and how you can get it and all that kind of stuff. But I will tell you, if you're into Generation 4 Glocks, you'll be happy to check one of these out. This is absolutely fantastic. And again, all of your parts drop right into it without an issue. So there isn't any additional parts or anything that you have to get for it. It's just ready to go out of the box. So I think Nomad has put together a fantastic frame. I'm really excited to see what else they have coming up at some point in the future. I'm sure they'll be working on some other frames as well. And no, I'm not committing them to it, but I think they will. I think they've done a great job, and they've got a winner on their hands with this. So guys, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about the Nomad defense frame, especially if you've got some experience with that. I love hearing other people's stories on these products. So be sure to sound off down below. Otherwise, guys, thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.